Welcome to Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital, promoting prosperity and harmony to help you flourish in all areas of life. Join in as we explore the motivations and goals of real estate investors and how their ability to invest abundantly has provided them with the time and freedom to contribute to the world in a creative and thoughtful way. Now please welcome your host, Dr. Allen.
Hello, enlightened investors. Dr. Allen here today with Brian Burke. Have you ever been told that you will never amount to much? Have you ever been in a situation where you didn't have a dime to your name? If you have, then you can relate to Brian's experience from taking a high school aptitude test that told him he had little aptitude for success and English and math teachers who wrote him off as a complete failure. On top of these disappointments, Brian came from a family with very little financial resources. Brian's story from penniless young man with seemingly little prospects to holding over $500 million in assets is enlightening and inspiring. Brian not only has an inspiring story, but is author of the book The Hands-Off Investor, an insider's guide to investing in passive real estate syndication. He generously and comprehensively shares his extensive knowledge and expertise. Enlightened investors, let's get to know Brian. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks for having me on again, Dr. Allen. It's good to be here.
Well, it's good to have you back again. We had an enjoyable conversation the first time. I'm sure it's going to be even more fun this time. Well, we talked a little bit about where you came from last time, so let's talk about where you are today. And my first question is, there was some point in time, your career here, where you passed from using your time to get money to using your money to get your time. Talk about that transition point in your life there.
You know, it's interesting sometimes how long it takes to reach that point of critical mass. And, it's our business has grown exponentially from the very humble beginnings that we had when I bought my first property with no money down. And then, now here it is where, I've crossed the $500 million mark. We've acquired over $500 million worth of real estate in this storied 30-year career. And it's just allowed me to do things that, I couldn't do before. In the early years, it was all about long hours and, not only working in a quote unquote W-2 job, also running a business at the same time and struggling through that element to where I could finally go full time into running the business. And full time meant just that, full time. It's like 15 hours a day, 7 days a week. And then, then you get to this point where you now may be working, 10 to 12 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week, and now I'm kind of at that point where, I probably only work 8 or 9 hours a day and only do that, 5 or 6 days a week. So it's a slow transition for me to, kind of make that switch. It just takes a lot of time. I finally gotten to this point now where if I keep my schedule like that, then I can take 3 weeks off and go to our second home in Maui and spend time there and spend the whole 3 weeks sitting out on the beach the way I've got the company structured. And today's technology, between those two things, it allows me to do exactly that. And that's something I never could have imagined doing 20 years ago. So for me, it hasn't been a flip of a switch from kind of one mode to the other. It's just been this slow, gradual process that's still a work in progress. I haven't got to that point now where I just sit back and invest my money in other people's deals and let them handle it. I'll probably do that in 20 or 30 years when I don't have the energy to do this anymore.
Well, I was talking to a guest just a couple of days ago, and he was saying essentially the same thing, that it takes an amazing amount of time to reach that point, much longer time than what most people realize. Most people never even actually get to that point.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, a lot of people see the late night TV course, right? That says that, if you buy this course for $499, we'll show you how you can be rich. And, it'll happen in 2 years. You can own all this property. And so the people set that expectation like that's how the process works. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't really work like that. If they really told you the truth and said, if you work really hard for 10 or 20 years, one day you can spend 3 weeks every other month on the beach. They probably wouldn't sell a lot of courses if they said it like that.
You're probably right, yes. Yeah, that's one thing about this industry. I just think there's a whole lot of overselling of expectations that just aren't particularly realistic. That's not to say that there can't be a lot of success here, but at the same time, there's a lot of hype that goes along. I think people need to be aware of that because I think it sets a lot of people up for a lot of major disappointment, the setbacks and failures that could be avoided if they went into it with a much more realistic perspective there. But I think back on it, there probably wasn't an exact moment in time when that switch flipped from working for money working for yourself, but kind of think back to that transitional period there. When did it kind of occur? When did you become aware that it had that switch had flipped?
Yeah, I would say probably sometime within the last 3 or 4 years. It was interesting. And that's 27 years into this career, right? When you kind of finally start to see the fruits of your labor. And I think a lot of that came from, when we bought that place in Maui. It was a dream of ours to one day be able to do that. Never thought it would be achievable. And then when the opportunity presented itself, we didn't even think we were going to be able to do it. We put in a ridiculous offer that was never going to be accepted. It almost became kind of a joke where it was like, let's just do this anyway. Why not? We ended up, it ended up being a successful transaction. And then you kind of look back on it and you go, wow, that's what all this hard work has been for. We actually have a tangible result to show that all the hard work that we've put in actually resulted in some positive benefits for us. That was a long, long time coming. And I think that was the first time I really realized that this business is working. It's actually giving us the ability to have a better work-life balance, to be able to spend more time at our favorite place and do the things that we find to be relaxing, which is almost nothing. If we can pull that off, then the sky's the limit. That was literally about 3 years ago, and that's about how long it took.
So you're saying it was about a 25-year journey with a lot of time, effort, and energy without actually seeing light at the end of the tunnel. What kept you going all that time?
Well, I knew where we were headed. You can see enough tangible result to say, okay, we're actually really building something here. You can see that the business is growing, the investor base is growing, the word of mouth and referrals are feeding upon each other, and you can see that there's a there. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you're going to get in the car and go for a drive, having a destination in mind really kind of helps keep you going. I had that destination in mind and I could see progress. The mileposts were ticking along the side of the highway and showing me how far it was before I was going to get there. So I could see that it was coming. And I think that was, if you have no result, it gets really difficult. And we went through years and years of no result. And I think, we could have been a lot more successful on the backs of other people, but I just was never willing to do that. One of the key elements for me was, We've never lost a nickel of investor principal in 20 years of doing this with investor money, $100 million plus and 37 prior offerings and 700 real estate transactions. Never lost anybody's money, but that doesn't mean we haven't lost money. And, there's been times where, I've written $1 million check just to cover an investor's loss because I'm maintaining that reputation of never having lost any money. We could have switched from our money working for money to having money work for us a lot sooner if I would just let investors take those losses. It just was a place I wasn't willing to go. I'll take that. I wanted to take that sacrifice, and I have the ability to make it back. Investors, some of them didn't, and for me, it's just better to keep that reputation, and that's what helped build this business, and it's what's going to help sustain the business. I can wait for my big payoff, and we probably could have had a different life 5 or 10 years sooner if I didn't choose to operate myself that way.
I also suspect that you could have lowered your sights, have gotten to a point and said, hey, this is good enough. at a different point in that process as well. It sounds to me like you had some pretty high aspirations and goals that you probably could have cut back on. Why didn't you?
It's just not me. I've always felt like if I shoot for the planets, or if I shoot for the stars, I might at least make it to the planets. Yeah, but if I shoot for the planets, maybe you only make it to the moon, or maybe you don't go anywhere at all. I really just like to aim high, I think is what it is. And I never really had a lot of goals growing up that really meant much of anything. And I never knew anybody that had really achieved any very, very high goals, and figured, why not be the first? Just, it motivated me to outperform. I mean, I remember, you always hear the stories of you're never going to amount to anything and all that kind of stuff. And, maybe some of it is just to prove people wrong.
That's not a bad thing.
That's right. Yeah. It's like, tell me I'll never amount to anything. It's a motivating experience. I think even sometimes the negativity in life is net positive.
Yeah. Were you actually told that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Really? I remember it was funny when I was a sophomore in high school, you take an aptitude test that was supposed to tell you what kind of career you would really excel in. I apparently wasn't going to excel at much. And I remember the test results, and I remember how angry my mother was. She's like, they can't tell you that. Nobody's going to tell my son that. And she got all mad and called the school and all this stuff. And it's like, you know what? I don't care. I'll make my own way, and people can judge the results off the results. People will figure it out sooner or later. So maybe some of that negativity was a motivating factor for me to just, anything you tell me I can't do, I'm going to do bigger than you ever imagined.
Yeah, I wonder if that doesn't have a lot to do with a lot of us. I had a similar experience in high school when we were doing those aptitude tests and scholastic tests and all that. I was advised to just go into a vocational track, forget college. I like to tell my students that story and say, now I can say, I've got a PhD. And that may be part of the motivation. It was just like, I'm not really as stupid as what a lot of people thought that I was. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I was told maybe I should consider going into farming. And instead, I've managed to completely on my own figure out how to go from not having a dime to my name to buying $500 million worth of real estate, operating a company that owns over 3,000 units, has the loyal following of over 1,000 investors that are all by word of mouth and referral. And I think none of that happens on its own. And I think, that's probably a pretty decent accomplishment over, just, picking fruit.
Yeah, it is an amazing journey that you have been on there. So tell us, what's it like to sit here and reflect upon, wow, I've really come a long ways here?
It's a little bit like an out of body experience. I never would have imagined that I could make some of the statements that I make now. Like I never would imagine saying $500 million in real estate in my name in the same sentence. I hated math in school. I never would have imagined that I would be writing my own software, which I did early on in my career, and it's what helped launch our business. I never would have imagined that I didn't know a single wealthy person. I never could have imagined that I could have thousands of them supporting me and investing in my business and trusting that I was going to make the right decisions. Those are all things that, as a young want to be entrepreneur that doesn't have any of the advantages, doesn't imagine ever saying any of those statements. So it is somewhat like an out of body experience. It's kind of weird sometimes when people ask me to describe my background and the things that I've accomplished. I never would have expected it if you would have asked me this 30 years ago.
How did you learn to write code?
I read this book that was about 3 inches thick. I just thought it was interesting. And I just, one page at a time and just tried it. I just kept going. And I think I spent about 2 years doing nothing but working on this program. And it just completely revolutionized our business. Because I figured, nobody knows what I would need a software program to do better than me. I might as well figure out how to write it, and so it'll do exactly what I want it to do. If I had to sit side by side with someone and tell them what I wanted it to do, it would have cost me $500,000.
Probably, yeah. At least.
And I didn't have $1,000, but I did have the $30 or $40 that it cost to buy the book. And I had the time to read it and learn from it and teach myself how to do it. So that's what I did.
Wow. That's amazing, from somebody who hated math, didn't do well in math, to be able to just pick up a book and from that write code that you're still using today. I'm sure, how long ago did you write that code?
That was 30-ish years ago.
Oh,
and
wow.
then, originally, and then of course, I've had to update it from time to time over the years as, computers have gotten more modern, but the program is in largely the same shape it was in back then, certainly with some vast improvements. About 12 years ago, I did almost a complete rewrite, and that really made a huge difference. We still use it to this day. I'll probably get another 10 or 20 years out of it. Wow. But since then, I've also written the second element. Once we got it, this was all for buying single-family foreclosures. Now that we're doing multifamily, it's all financial analysis and formulas and and all that kind of stuff. So I've written a second program that does all of our financial analysis. And, I've been told by some of the most active guys in the industry who have seen it, it's the best they've ever seen. And these are guys that work for large institutions that control billions of dollars, that do nothing but see, analysis software from real estate sponsors, and they know what they're talking about. So I kind of take that to heart and figure I did something right. So I feel like we have the competitive advantage of having some of the best tools and software in the industry. And I can take a little bit of pride in the fact that I wrote it myself. But what I take is more important than anything is that I know it inside and out and frontwards and backwards. There's no number associated with our multifamily acquisition that I don't thoroughly understand. And I know how one number interrelates to the other, and I know what moving one lever and how that affects the other the outcome and other levers. And it's just an incredible depth of understanding that I think is really important if you want to be successful in buying commercial real estate, which is really just simply an exercise in financial analysis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. But that is very impressive that you said 12 years ago was when you made really the last extensive update on that. That's a really lasting program. When a 5-year-old computer is an old computer and your program has lasted, still working and working well over a 12-year period, that's got to be a well-written program. Has to be.
Our team uses it every day.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's all about good financial analysis. So that's a great platform you've got there. Before we run out of time here, not only have you written code, but you have also written a book. Tell us about writing a book, what that experience was like. What have you learned about yourself, about the industry, writing the book?
Well, I learned how hard it is to write a book. For a C average high school graduate who hated English just as much as he hated math. I made a joke a few months ago that I said if my high school English teachers ever found out that I was writing a book, they would be convinced that certainly there was some mistake because there would be no way that could possibly happen, much less to get the book published. So it was an interesting accomplishment and a lot more work than I'd anticipated, but I was a glutton for punishment, obviously, and I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And it's a good thing I didn't figure out what I was getting myself into until it was too late to turn back, because it would have been very easy to have done so. But I was talking with a friend of mine, Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets. We were talking about some books that he's written for them, and he's written several. And I was just kind of remarking about how amazing it was to me that he could write so many books, and, you know, I couldn't write a book at all. He said, you know what, it's really easy. Here's all you got to do. And he gave me a couple of pointers on how to kind of get started. And I thought, well, gosh, that sounds kind of easy. I can do that. Went back and I implemented his advice, and I did exactly what he said. And, then, like I said, by then I was beyond the point of no return, because the difficult part starts after that. I began writing. It took me about 9 months. Every evening after I'd get home from the office, I would just start writing. All weekend I would be writing, and then, you got to rewrite, and I don't like what I said. I got to go write it again. It was a very, very involved process, but it was important to me because I did some research and I found that there was no book written on the topic of how to invest as a passive syndication investor in real estate investments. There was lots of books on how to raise money from other people to buy real estate using other people's money, but there was no book written for the other people, the ones who were actually bringing that money to the deal, to know whether they were investing in a solid opportunity with a solid operator, what to look for, how to understand what they're looking at, and how all the math works. And here I am, I suddenly became a math teacher on the subject I hated the most. There's a whole section of this book dedicated to real estate math, how it all works. And, that came from my spreadsheet background, writing our analysis software. I was able to take extractions from that to create examples, to show people, these are the things to look for in a syndication offering. These are the kinds of things that can be manipulated by the sponsor, and here's how they can be manipulated. Here's the range of values that you would see that you would consider to be normal, and here's the range of values that might not be normal. When I was all said and done, this dang thing was like 365 pages. So I guess really I wrote almost 2 books in one.
Yeah, really.
It's really a complete and comprehensive reference guide that really not only passive investors could use, but also active real estate investors who want to learn more about the financial analysis side of real estate could really stand to benefit from certain portions of this book. But it was just, it was a bit of a thing for me that, I had a friend that lost her entire life savings investing into a syndication offering with a sponsor that turned out to be a crook. And I thought, if I could prevent that from happening to just one person, this whole experience will have been worth it. We'll see.
So our viewers and listeners know they can actually go to your site and they can get a free chapter from the book. Is that correct?
Yeah, you can actually. I'm glad you said that. I totally forgot that we did that. Yeah, on our site, there's a pop-up that comes up, and you can get the introductory chapter. There's a link to the introductory chapter you can get for free. I don't have the distribution rights, so I can't give away the book. That was part of the publishing contract, but introductory chapter is out there in the public domain, so to speak. So we're able to give people the ability to see that, and if they like what they've read so far, then you can get the book on Amazon at your local bookstore if they're open or still in business, or through the biggerpockets.com website, where you get bonus content for ordering straight from the publisher by way of a couple of interviews I conducted, as well as some other bonus content that they make available for direct purchases.
How else can folks get in touch with you?
Our website's a great way. It's praxcap.com. It's praxcap.com. Of course, I am on the biggerpockets.com website, which is basically a social media site for real estate investors. I like to answer people's questions on the forums from time to time, so you can sometimes find me there. And then, of course, social media channels. I'm starting to get a little bit better at that. So I have my own Instagram now. It's at Investor Brian Burke, or at PraxCap for our Praxis Capital Instagram page, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that different stuff. We're everywhere. We're out there. You'll find us.
Brian, it has been a pleasure. Thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me on again, Dr. Allen. It was great to see you again, and look forward to chatting with you again sometime.
Enlightened investors, to spearhead your life to time freedom to live abundantly, head over to steedtalker.com and pick up your free guide to passive real estate investing. Also, please take a moment and go to Apple Podcast and leave us a 5-star review. Your review will help us immensely to spread the stories of successful real estate investors whose lives inspire others to passively invest in real estate, to live a life of time freedom, to live more abundantly in all areas of life. Enlightened investors, prosperous trails to you until we meet again.
Thank you for joining us on Creekside Chats with Successful Real Estate Investors, brought to you by Steed Talker Capital. For more information, as well as access to our free ebook on enhancing your well-being through real estate investing, be sure to connect with us at steedtalker.com. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steed Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine and enhance the humane treatment of horses worldwide. Steed Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. Connect with us at steedtalker.com.